right?
Mahdin, just a second. Sean has joined us. Welcome, Sean. How are you doing?
Hey, good. How nice to meet you guys.
All
Hello.
right, great that you joined. So ask whatever you have. And Mahdin, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to let
No, I
just
said my
welcome.
part. I said my part there. So
Yeah,
All right.
I just wanted to say, like, I guess I wanted to clear up my statement. So basically, when I hear these guys, like, well, I deal with the comment section quite a bit at some of these debates, and basically, I could give an argument, like a logical argument, or I could appeal to intuition. But a lot of the times, an atheist won't accept that sort of thing. They want something tangible, something they could observe, right? Like when Dillahunty or Aaron Ra, when they ask for when they define their evidence, they're talking about something. I could reproduce it. I could analyze it. This some sort of phenomena that's occurring
yeah,
that could
yeah,
be like, you know what I'm saying? So, but we don't think that God operates like that. And even if, for example, there was something like that, like I think Dillahunty mentioned, okay, like a plane crashing into the building. Well, if God had stopped it, that's sufficient evidence that God existed. But that's not true, because if something like that happened, they would just presume something else. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's God that did it. It could have been some other sort of supernatural occurrence. But even then, those guys wouldn't even agree with that was a supernatural occurrence. They would default to it was some sort of natural occurrence that occurred, and because it's just something that we don't know, so it needs to be studied. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Do you want me to take this, Philo?
Yeah,
Basically,
Mahdin,
I'm
go ahead.
I'm
Go
just
for it.
I'm just commenting on
Yeah.
their
I
epistemology, right?
understand. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with you because I do think, for example, that sort of peer-reviewed, falsifiable evidence, repeated, tangible, that's a little bit too strict, right? That's for
Yeah.
certain types of phenomena and maybe particular types of things. Maybe let's say somebody's making a particular theist is making an argument that God answers prayers, right? Now you're making an
Hmm.
argument that is measurable to some extent, right? Depending on how you define it. And if somebody's saying you can successfully answer prayers, then it's within the natural world to be studied. And in that situation, it'd be recommended that the theist produces the evidence, maybe within a scientific journal, to show that there's indeed repeated studies showing that prayers are being answered. Yeah, there's a link between prayer and the outcome, and they've done that. There's many churches and ministries and psychological studies on this as well, medical studies on this of prayer being observed, as it was intercessory prayer. Yeah, but in other situations, if you're making just an argument that is analytical entirely, I agree at that point. Asking for tangible evidence is wrong-headed in the sense that you can't just limit it and restrict it to that. You have to head-on tackle an argument. And if the argument is such that it's just merely analytical, it's true by concepts and so on, then you have to have the philosophical training to understand that. I think people like things. Dillahunty is strange because Dillahunty is a fond of philosophy, so yeah, I thought he would understand that. Aaron Ra, on the other hand, I know he hates philosophy, and
Yeah.
he just wants things to be tangible, and I disagree with him on that. That although that is one way of getting evidence for certain types of claims, for certain narrow claims, it's not for all types of claims, especially not for all types of God claims. So, for example, if somebody's making the argument, the moral argument for God, for the existence of God, that doesn't require, I would think, peer-reviewed, tangible, reproducible evidence. That you can analyze the premises on its own, for its own regard. Yeah, but in this particular debate, Haqiqatjou didn't give any. Right, he was coming from intuitions entirely.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think that's wrong?
You might want to listen to this video again.
Yeah.
Because
Sorry, because I was watching it, but then I noticed you guys were live, and I was commenting on somebody else's comment, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should just join the live instead. But
right.
okay,
Could I give my
You're
2 cents on the question? Yes.
sure.
Yeah. The thing you were asking about how some of these people require, repeatable, testable evidence for God, and I kind of agree. Maybe that's not the kind of proof that would be necessary to prove God. But to add on to Madan's point, there's a great argument I heard from one of these famous atheist YouTube channels, which basically goes over the idea of prayer. And for example, if someone has cancer and they're undergoing chemotherapy, oftentimes there will be also there'll be people that are praying for them as well. And once these people are healed of their cancer, many of them credit it to God. Now the thing here is that since there's two variables, right? There's the chemotherapy and then there's the prayer. It's hard to isolate, which one caused them to be healed again. For some people, this is enough evidence for God if they're healed from some big calamity, right? But for a neutral person, it's really not. You can't isolate the variables in this case. But then there are things, there are conditions where the human body has no mechanisms to repair itself. So take the example of amputation, right? Amputation, the human body has no mechanism with which it can repair amputated limbs. But that doesn't stop people from praying. And this is a particular case where you can isolate the variable, right? So in this case, it's just prayer. It's no medical intervention. And we have never heard or seen someone or have had any documented case where prayer brought back someone's arm, right? When the human body had no mechanism to do so. So this is one possible way, if prayer worked, if God existed, you would expect maybe this could be one proof that you would have where a particular religion's prayer was healing its adherents' arms, and you would know that religion is right because they're praying to the right God, and He's giving them, for example, miracles, right? Where science, of course, cannot help them, and the body itself has no mechanisms to repair this kind of damage, right? So that might be one possible way you could prove God exists or a particular religion is true.
Well, I think you have to consider how skeptical the person you're dealing with is. So, for example, right, if I have an arm and I cut my arm off, I have are you guys familiar with phantom limbs? Where I'm feeling a sensation despite having no material way of I shouldn't be able to feel the sensation, but here I am feeling it. So they're going to say, okay, well, this is not supernatural. It's just that we don't understand. So if you employ a supernatural reason for this, now this is God of the gaps, right? So just because a prayer is being answered, that doesn't necessarily make it so that God did it. It could be a coincidence. It could be something else. And again, it depends how skeptical some people are. Like, for example, if I could steelman the whole atheistic argument. If I have a being in front of me here, he's standing right beside me. He's making a house appear and disappear at his will. He's raising people from the dead and then causing them to die. Yeah. That doesn't necessitate that he is God.
Did it by God, yeah. Right, but why do you think that's the case? Why do you think people say that?
What do you mean?
Why do you think an atheist says that doesn't necessarily mean it's God?
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying if you're being skeptical, because like an atheist might actually accept that sort of thing. But
why do you think skepticism leads to that?
Sorry, say it again.
I'm saying, why do you think being skeptical leads to that conclusion for the atheist?
Well, they're selectively skeptical, right? Because they're only choosing a certain epistemology, right? They only understand materialism. So when they're seeing something and they can't explain it, now they might default that this person is a god, but that's not necessarily so. And there's a lot of reasons why, I can make an argument why a person, just because they're performing miracles, that can't be God actually. So I think there's I think a lot of atheists actually they don't understand Islam. Firstly, they don't understand a lot of philosophy, and again, it's blind worship, following of scientific imperialism, right?
Right. So let me just give some sketches of why some people might think in this particular way, right? So one reason could be, for example, if somebody's let's say I come up to you and I build a house, right? Okay, and then I tell you I am the greatest chemist in the world. Did I give you evidence to demonstrate that I'm the greatest chemist in the world?
No.
Why not? But I built a house in front of you.
Because building a house doesn't necessitate that doesn't require chemistry.
Okay, there you go. So that could be one reason why. So if there's like a being turning water into wine, for example, right? It might be the case that turning water into wine doesn't demonstrate that you are an omnipotent being omnibenevolent being, omnipresent being, and immaterial being, right? Those properties have to be independently maybe established.
Yes.
Right. So that could be one reason why you can't go from that this a being is turning water into wine, that therefore it's a God, because a God is an infinite being, is infinitely powerful. And unless you've demonstrated some sort of infinite capabilities, which is hard to demonstrate, it's hard to physically demonstrate infinite capabilities. But you may say then that's just imposing a materialistic lens on things.
Exactly. So that's precisely what I believe. I think that just because a person could do something that would seem, extraordinary, right? But that's the type of thing that these guys are looking for, right? Like Matt Dillahunty, he would follow a person, like a person that looked like me, for example. If I was, like he said in the debate, if he had stopped a plane just with his mind, this is sufficient for him to follow this person and believe that that person is God. But being a person in time and space, like, you contradict so many properties of God that it's actually impossible for that to be God. But that's the thing that these guys are looking for. So what I'm saying is they're looking for the answers in the wrong place.
I think you broke up a little bit there, yeah, when you were talking. Sorry, Khayalie, you want to say something? Hello?
Could I add on to the phantom limb thing? I know it's an example, it's not central to Sean's argument, but the phantom limb syndrome is there's already strong evidence to believe it's not supernatural. It's a malfunction of your brain, kind of, and there's ways to trick your brain into fixing it in some way. So the thing with some people who have phantom limb syndrome is that they sometimes feel an itch on the leg or arm that's no longer there, and of course, since it's not there, they can scratch the itch. But there's a therapy, I think it's called mirror therapy or something, where you mount a mirror on next to the arm that you currently have, and you trick your body, and then you scratch that arm, and while looking into the mirror, and your body thinks that you're scratching the arm that no longer is with you. So the thing is that I don't think science is the only way to truth. I think that's a straw man that many theists use. But the thing is that we need to acknowledge that in our lifetimes and before our lifetimes, there have been thousands, if not more, things that were in the realm of the supernatural that came to the natural. So even if you have a bias towards science, that bias is founded, it has some backing to it, whereas the supernatural side really does not. So it's not the same, I think, having tilt to one side or the other.
I just wanted to clarify. Like, I don't think that phantom limb is a supernatural thing. That was just an example I was using, right? Like, it might seemingly be so, but an atheist would just assume that there's a natural explanation for it. That's just an example. So anything that could seemingly be supernatural, and we currently don't have any explanation for it, an atheist would assume that there's a scientific reason for it, right? Yeah, like they're always going to default to that, no matter what.
Do you think that happens? Yeah. Do you think that's happening arbitrarily, randomly?
No, I think people are conditioned to think that way, right? That's what Daniel brought up in the debate, right? He was talking about analytic thinking, and
but they're conditioned to think that way because it's successful.
What has been the trend in the past 2,000 years, 2 millennia or so? That which method has been more successful?
Yeah, like, but the thing is, you could be holistic, right? Like, you don't have to adhere to just one thing. Like during the debate, Daniel was saying, okay, I have intuition that evil exists and good exists. Like, does anybody deny that? But that's not a natural observable thing. That's not something that science talks about, right? But that's something that our intuition. Like, I don't know anybody that denies that. Do you guys deny that?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I just couldn't hear.
About evil and good.
Okay.
The thing is, all right, we're kind of jumping from different topics, though. So let's just put that aside for a minute, because you were talking about explanations about the universe. If there was a explanation needed for the universe, atheists would make the argument this is a god of the gaps, right? There's probably a natural explanation, right? And let's just specify the natural explanations for that. Let's just I'm just going to basically devote some assessment, my time of devote my thinking for that on that for a moment, rather than evil and good and so on, because that's slightly different in the sense that that is a physical, natural thing, right? So if you can't explain the clouds, or you can't explain electricity or atoms, or something happens in the world, why are atheists appealing to natural explanations versus and saying that theists are saying this is a god of the gap, saying to theists that this is a god of the gaps? Well, the reason is because of the frequency of explanations historically. All of the background evidence is suggesting, and this is induction. If, for example, you have a bag, and in that bag that you're pulling out lots of, let's say, jelly beans, and if in that bag, every time you take out a jelly bean, it's always red, a red jelly bean. By the time you get to the 100th one, the 101st jelly bean that you're going to take out, you're going to probably bet, you're willing to bet, you will put your money on it, that is likely to be another red jelly bean, right? Now, it might be the case that there might be a blue one or a green one. There might be one or two. But given the huge trend of jelly beans all the way down that have been red, it would be completely rational. And it'll be irrational to predict it's any other color. Now, that's the same thing when you apply it to the physical world. When you see an experience, see something that's unsolved in the universe, we're not saying it's impossible that it could be a supernatural thing, or you're not saying it's impossible to be something else. It's just that given the sheer frequency of historical explanations to turn out to be a natural physical explanation, something biochemical, something biological, sociological, physical, fundamentally, quantum, whatever. The sheer frequency of these explanations shows that it would be irrational to think the next one that we find, the next mystery, will be solved with a supernatural explanation. That is the argument. It's called the argument for naturalism, or arguments for the success of science, or the success of physicalism. It's just that every explanation has been physical, therefore the next one is likely to be physical too. That might not be applicable to other things like this good and bad stuff, because that's not talking about maybe it's not talking about the natural world. But when you start talking about the natural world, that's the argument. That's the atheistic argument for it.
Yeah, so I totally understand that. I'm actually a scientist, and I believe in a deterministic universe, and I'm all about that. So don't worry about that. But that's why I brought up good and evil, because in your epistemology, you shouldn't be hyper focused on one and the exclusion of others. So I think you have to, like, for me, intuition, logic, and empirical evidence.
You bought those afterwards, right? Then we can talk about those separately. But do you accept that all these other natural explanations, like if, for example, a plane was suspended in midair, that deferring to a natural explanation first, just like, let me give you an example. Just say you hear a sound in your car. Now, if I said, oh, it's aliens, and you'd probably think I've gone crazy, right? Because most of the time, sounds in the car are not created by aliens. It's something to do with the engine, something to do with the exhaust. These are rational explanations. But why are they rational? Because of our background evidence. Why is the background evidence as such? Because of history of explanations have been that cars usually make sounds. That's the more likely hypothesis to explain the sound, and so on, rather than aliens. And in the same sense, then, that's what I'm trying to say. When if you do see a plane do this or something happen in the world, you might want to defer to a supernatural explanation. But if physical explanations, natural explanations have been successful so much, shouldn't that be your go-to first?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, absolutely. I think if you're living in the universe, then the things that you're observing in the universe, yeah, sure. I don't disagree with that. I never disagreed with that.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't call it a prejudice, would you, in that sense? Because a prejudice means that you're siding with it for no reason. But if you have a frequency of explanations like that, right, that favors naturalism, then it's not a prejudice to think that naturalistic explanations probably explain unknown phenomena. Yeah.
So I agree. Like if you're dealing with something inside the universe, then yeah, you would default to the imperialistic sort of thinking. But when you're talking about God, that God is not inside the universe. So this is the hang up. You see, you can't assume the naturalistic sort of you shouldn't be assuming empiricism for something that's outside the universe. Does that make sense?
But do you think God interacts with the universe?
Yes, that's the question. That's the fundamental question. Do you believe in miracles, right?
Yeah.
So if those kind of things can happen, so you believe that there is a kind of an interaction happening between God and the world he has created, he or she or whatever you want to say, right?
Yeah,
Now,
but the
the
thing is,
fundamental question is, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, the only issue is we don't know how God interacts with the universe. But so I believe in the, I'm sure you guys know the argument of contingency, that everything is contingent, and we believe that God is actively sustaining the universe. So I think that is God literally, even in this moment, he's sustaining everything's existence. But that's not something I could directly observe, is it? Because it's outside the universe.
Yeah, but then you probably make an argument from contingency, which could be assessed, right? So that's a different thing. So nobody probably disagrees that the argument for contingency does. If somebody says to you that you need empirical evidence for the argument of a contingency, I probably disagree with them, right? That can be assessed for its own merits, for its own logic, right? Because it's a completely philosophical, abstract, analytical argument without any real necessary evidence, I think, that you need. It's completely conceptual, and that can be addressed for its own merits. So I would agree with you if you think a scientist comes along and says, where's the evidence for God then? Because I think if the contingency argument is correct, then that would successfully establish the existence of God.
Yeah, so I just bring up the
I agree
contingency
as well,
argument. I just bring up the contingency argument just to say that I think even in this moment, like me talking to you, our existences are at this moment sustained by God. So God is in fact acting right now, but this is not something that I can observe. You understand? So this is beyond scientific methodology of observation. Does that make sense? So when you guys are asking about prayers, you guys are asking about like God.
Yeah, but do you believe in
interacting with
prayers?
the universe? This is not something that we could observe.
Yeah, but do you believe prayers are answered?
Yeah. Well, so it depends. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, right?
Right, but
So,
do they work?
so there's no way for you to. Sorry, Mahdin, go ahead.
No, it's all right. Do you want to, I think we're both saying the same thing. Basically, I just wanted to say, like, can we distinguish between a successful, like, if you take, because you're a scientist.
Yeah.
So I would imagine you would know that you'll have to take, let's say, a case study, 2 sample populations, one population that's been prayed for, one population that's not been prayed for. Would you say that if it works, then it must work more than the population that's not been prayed for, right? There should be a statistical significant difference, or at least one that passes the standards of science, at least, right? The population that's been prayed for, we should see some successful outcomes in the measurements.
Not necessarily.
So how would you distinguish it from it not happening at all?
Yeah, you couldn't know.
So then it's meaningless, pretty much, right?
I wouldn't say it's meaningless. So that's the thing. You don't know how it happens.
If you don't know, I mean, sorry.
No, but the thing is, though, it could right. Okay, but so I agree with you that if you establish God through contingency argument, then you establish God through contingency argument. On a stretch, you may be able to say that God even sustains it. Fine, I don't see anything.
Mahdin, you can still reach to God, and then you can still not say that He intervenes, He or she intervenes.
I know.
Right?
I was going to say this. I was proceeding to say the exact same point. I can agree with you that if you establish God through the contingency argument, this is God contingency, that God might exist, but it might not be a God that answers prayers, unless you have because at that point, when you say my God answers prayers, you are making a claim about the natural world.
Yeah, but then I wouldn't like, so the contingency argument, it only takes you to a necessary being, right? And then you could have arguments like the one that Jake had later on, where you have a God with a mind, and then he determines things to be one way as opposed to another way, right? But then to get to, does God answer prayers or not? Well, then you need theology for that. Does that make sense?
But theology would require, I think, some external substantiation, because the objection might be is that what is written in theologically might not be true unless they're demonstrated. Because ultimately, theology is not the only source. A scripture won't be the only source, because the book will. We need some independent evidence to establish the truthfulness of the scripture, right? It could very well be that there's a contingent God. Sorry, not contingent. A necessary God through the contingency argument that ultimately is not telling the truth through the scripture. But so you will need then more evidence to show that, in fact, what it says about the scripture is correct. So if I wrote, if in the book it says X, Y, Z about I answer prayers, I do this, you'll still need some evidence. And if the evidence doesn't support that, then the best explanation would be, yes, there seems to be a God. There seems to be maybe a scripture linking it to the God, but it could be that God is lying or is incompetent or something like that.
Exactly. Yes, that's where I wanted to get to. How do you know that the God cannot lie? Unless until, even if he tells you he's not a liar, you have no way of knowing that he's not a liar.
Yeah, because at this point, you're in the natural world, right? So why wouldn't you apply science? This is the area of science.
Yes and no. So I would say, like, okay, you could the contingency argument just takes you to a deistic type of God, right? And then from there you get to a God with a will through other argumentation. Where then,
I mean, just to mention, there are problems with the contingency arguments. We are not going to deal with that right now because that's going to take our stream to 4 or 5 hours. We don't want to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
But assuming that we reach to a God, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so then you would get to a deistic sort of God. Then you can make an argument for God with a will. Okay, from there, then what do? Well, you know that there's a God. You know that you exist. Like, this is now you're going into intuitions area, right? I know that I have this internal feeling. I have purpose. I believe in good and evil. These are my intuitions, and I have to deal with life. Like, you can't walk through life, interact with people without purpose, without, like, you know what I'm saying. So this is stuff that, like, this is beyond science now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the thing is, why did you not just use your intuition in the first place to get to God? Why did
you could. But now I only use the contingency argument or these other arguments for somebody who is who's like, like
wait. Where's the intuitive argument for prayer and prayers being answered?
Yeah, people pray all the time. If you're like, for example, like the common example, if a boat is sinking, now people start praying for a God, right? Like that's their intuition, that's their fitra coming through, right? But
so you think,
but sorry, I just want to say that once you get to a, like, the contingency argument or any other argument, they get you to one God. There's only one religion in the world, predominantly right now, that believes in a monotheistic God. We can have arguments about other, but this is where you start testing the theologies out there that are available, and you test to see, is there validity to this, or is there something that is there a contradiction in the religion that makes it false? Like, this is where you start going into the theology and testing the merits of them. And then from there you would get good, evil, like prayer, like that. That's where you get to all those sort of things. But again, there's certain things you can get into intuitively, like praying for God. If you have a hard life and you're struggling, a lot of people start praying or asking help or just like contemplate. You get those feelings of emotion.
So why are we all right? It's a little bit of hodgepodge of different things here. So at some point you said you want a contingency argument, and then now we're on intuitions. But if you go for intuitions, we can just take the entire thing on intuition, right?
No, well, that's the thing. You're trying to stick to one thing or the other, but I think I'm trying to tell you need to be holistic. You can't just stick to just science. You can't stick to just logic. You can't stick to just intuition. You could use all three. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but why not? Why can't you? Why can't you just stick to intuition?
Why would you limit yourself? Why would you limit yourself?
No. The point is not that you can't make an argument for God through other means. I'm saying if you have intuitions, can in principle somebody just do it entirely on intuitions? If it's a workable method, then why can't somebody just do it on intuition? What's wrong with that?
So, like, for example, I'm a Muslim. Obviously, you can't intuitive your way through the whole religion, right? We need scripture for that sort of thing. But intuition can get you to the front door, basically, and then from there, theology could take you the rest of the way. Same with logic and reason. To be honest with you, I think the empirical sort of stuff could contribute to your logic and reason. Like,
But look. Why can't your intuitions get you to scripture?
They could. A lot of people do. I don't know if you guys know Sheikh Uthman, but when he does his street dawah, he literally says, like, do you believe in a God? And they'll be like, yes. And he's like, okay, well, there's only one monotheistic religion, and that's Islam. So you're a Muslim. Like, that, a lot of people get to God through intuition. If I were to tell you,
the scripture, you can get to a monotheistic God, but why would you go for the scripture?
Well, you mean why settle at deism? Why not settle at deism? Well,
yeah, something like that.
Well, so for example, like you have a feeling of right and wrong, but what is right or wrong, right? Like, like how would you determine? You would go, like I personally believe that good and evil, those things are objective, not subjective. But if you only stick with deism, well, now it's basically subjective, right? That's all you have to work with. But go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, because if you use intuitions, you can go the whole way through intuitions, because there doesn't seem to be an upper limit or a stopping point to intuition. You can go, your intuitions can simply take you wherever you want it to go. It seems.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem a bit subjective?
I mean, you just don't have to navigate your way through all these mazes to get to wherever you want to go. I mean, just intuition is a straight path you can just take, right?
Can you use a different word to describe intuition? What is intuition?
Intuition, basically, I would describe it as like almost natural programming. Like, so. Like,
why do you need science if you have intuition?
Why do you need science if you need intuition? Well, I'm not saying. Listen, I'm not saying you can use your intuition for every single thing.
Why not?
Because it is limited.
How do you determine those limits?
It's not practical for a lot of things. If I write an exam on a quiz without studying, I'll get a lot of questions wrong, right?
How did you determine it's good for determination of a god, or maybe the scripture, or all those things?
But why are you getting those questions wrong in that? Isn't that like a human thing?
Why you stop at some points and then not stop at the other points is the question, basically. Right?
Why, as you talked about the exam, you're saying you'll get a lot of questions wrong, but maybe you got it right. Maybe the examiner got it wrong.
Yeah, but but then my intuition could contradict your intuition, right?
Right. So it's subjective.
Yeah, to a certain degree, it is subjective. But there are certain things that are seemingly objective. So, like the examples that Daniel brought up.
But certain things are subjectively seemingly objective.
Yeah.
Through your intuition.
Sorry, say again.
Subjectively seemingly objective, because an intuition is subjective, right? So seemingly, subjectively, it's object, but you're still using subjectivity to determine it's objective.
Yeah. Well, like but you're living your life, right? So it is subjective to a degree. But again, a lot of things are seemingly objective because, again, I could interview every single person that exists on this earth, and I could ask them, "Do you believe in good and evil?" And almost all of them will say yes, right? That's the argument that Daniel was bringing up in the debate.
I think, Sean, the only
even
the
if
disconnect,
everyone just like even
the disconnect I see here is you need to see the stream first, basically.
Because we talk about
the objections that you are posting here or have already been discussed here, right, in the stream. So you go back, listen to this, and then maybe these questions will make.
I'm just trying to have a conversation. I'm just trying to interrogate, because I'm actually genuinely interested in how you hold this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, again, like I'm not. That's the thing. I'm not sticking to just my intuition. Intuition is a part. It has a role. Do you agree with
I get it. I'm just trying to figure out how you make that demarcation between intuition and things that don't need intuition.
That's intriguing, by the way.
Yeah. And then if you admit it is subjective, well, I mean, for the longest time, a lot of people said subjective beliefs are unlikely to be true. I mean, if something is subjective, then it's just in my mind. That's the whole point of, it's a figment of my imagination. It doesn't exist independent to my mind. But now you're saying...
could I just get one, because I have to leave? I just wanted to add one thing. You mentioned, there are some things that are subjective, but everyone agrees upon them in the world. That still doesn't make it objective. That's the whole thing with objective morality that secular people try to derive. The religious people's objection to it is, even if everyone agrees, it's still subjective. So it doesn't necessarily follow that it becomes objective, but it's lovely having you on stream, and you seem like a reasonable guy. And I hope I get to talk to you again, but I really have to go. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Hey, nice to meet you, bro. Actually, you know what? I'll actually concede that point then. Yeah, I'll actually concede that point that your intuition has to be subjective. I'll concede to that.
Right. So I'm just trying to figure out then, because I like what you're saying in terms of this goes through an intuition. I'm just trying to figure out how we can use that as a method, because to get to God or anything objective. Because if you're going through a subjective pathway.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are right. I think that when you're using your intuition, it has to be totally subjective, and I think that again, it has a role to play, right? It's not every single thing. Could it get you to a God? again, it's subjective, right? So in Islam, we believe in guidance, right? So if I do good, if I pray to God, if I do these things, then God guides me. So that increases my belief in Him. It increases my iman, right? So
Right.
that's very personal. I
Right.
can't. I could pray for somebody else's guidance. Like I could pray for your guidance or for Sapiens' guidance, and maybe it would help. Maybe it wouldn't, because I don't like. Again, in our religion, we believe that iman, it fluctuates with who you are. So if you're doing good, then you're more likely to get guided, and if you are evil, then you're less likely to be guided. It basically hardens your heart. That's what we say in our religion. But
Right.
again, this is something that's beyond science for sure. Like this is not something that you can...
I think from here we get into the theology pretty much, and that's
exactly.
then that becomes a even more turbulent waters basically. So I think we should stick to the philosophical side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So
But
yeah.
No, that's good. No, I like that you've acknowledged that it does seem a bit subjective, because that's what it kind of appears to us.
Yeah,
You know?
no, it definitely is subjective. It definitely is subjective. I was trying to think of it in terms like the way Daniel was using it, because he would refer to a bunch of studies that would say like, okay, you know what? When we interview kids that are in Japan, or they're in these other societies that are currently atheistic or secular, these kids are natural monotheists. Like that's something that like he would, you know. It seems objective, but it probably isn't objective. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So on this stream, before you came on, we did talk about some of those things, and it's very hard to distinguish between cultural upbringing and it being innate or internal or like a natural belief. So a lot of those studies. I mean, I cited a literature review on this, and this is in the domain of science, because we're talking about psychology here, right? This is why we have studies. And there's a literature review, or at least somebody who's went out and found the review. His name is John Shook. He didn't do the review himself, but he found the review, I think. And I think, Philo, you posted it in the private chat. Maybe you can post it here if you can. And he did a survey of the literature review on whether or not our belief in God is innate. And at this moment, unfortunately, it doesn't look like a belief in God is innate per se, right? There's methodological problems with the studies. It doesn't control for the environment properly. The children are sometimes old enough to be still indoctrinated or conditioned or socialized into believing God, right? The parents tend to have a theistic leaning already and influencing them to believe in a particular way, and etc. Or if they do find something that's natural about it, it's not really a belief in God per se, but belief in other things, like they more readily, like there's a study by Justin Barrett, and they more readily accept anthropomorphic explanations or creation myths, creation explanations about objects versus like evolutionary theory, right? A child's mind is more readily capable of understanding, for example, if somebody says a person made a tree versus, I think it was Justin Barrett. Don't quote me on Justin Barrett, but I think it was his study. Maybe it was another study. But a person made a tree is more easily understandable for a child versus evolution created the tree, or biology created the tree on its own. And now that gets described as natural, but that's still far away from making the conclusion that it's a God belief. First of all, secondly, that could just be due to experience, right? Children, when you're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, you see people make things, you see people make stuff. Therefore, when you're confronted with something like rain happens on its own through clouds, or evolution has occurred for this many years, a child's not going to be able to understand that, because the child's young mind is used to seeing people make sandwiches, people making cars, people making all this, and therefore he's make the natural inference. Just like
it's conditioned to think that way, right?
Yeah. So you get used to that. That doesn't show it's natural, though. It doesn't show there's like an innate fitra, and that's not been established yet. I don't know how you're going to do that, because something that Philo said before, if you're too young, it's hard to assess what the baby believes, because the baby can't talk or communicate or relay what they know. But if you're too old, at the state of cognitive abilities to understand the reality, you're in the cognition, you're in the state of being conditioned and influenced by your parents, in which case you can always say the environment has affected you. And I don't think there's been enough studies to show, to disambiguate between the two, to show it's in fact really it's natural and not the society causing this.
Yeah, I
right. Before
Go ahead.
Sean, before you respond, can you see this a paper that Mahdin mentioned?
Yeah, I can see it.
Right. So I'll just stop the screen. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with you. To be honest with you, I think psychology in general, like I have a minor in psychology. I have some experience with it.
Right.
Actually, in my university, they made psychology an arts degree and a science degree. You could pick whichever one, but because there's a lot of issues with it. Like it's not like studying a cell or studying like a skeleton. It's not. It's there's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of, I like to think, indeterminacy involved. And yeah, to be honest with you, to do a study, and it's hard to make it basically bulletproof, to make that kind of argument, or
Yeah.
to make, yeah, I would totally agree with that. It'd be hard to determine, but like, for example, I remember Daniel had a guy on his stream. He's a Christian, I think he was Catholic, and he said like, yeah, my kid, she's a monotheist. Again, that's totally subjective, right? But it's that's your own personal experience. Like that's not really something that you could make a grand claim like this is definitely true, therefore everything else, right? So yeah, I think proving fitra with like studies, that would be very difficult to do, 100%, because there's too many variables involved for it to be
Right.
you couldn't use that to really really force somebody to believe that to be true.
Yeah. That's
Or I think Sean, it was really nice having you on the stream. Really nice conversation. Do you think, Mahdin, you want to go ahead for a little bit more, or shall we stop the stream and maybe
I think
Sean
it's
can come back again later sometime?
I think it's getting a bit late. It's 11 o'clock here in the UK. But Sean, I genuinely mean that you've been a very nice. There's been a very nice interaction. I enjoyed it a lot. And we enjoyed talking with you, and we want you back. Right.
All right. So, yes, definitely. You're welcome.
Definitely subscribe. Show your friends. Come on the stream. As you know, we treat you nicely. We don't want to argue with you in a hostile way. And we genuinely want to hear your points and listen to what's going on.
Yeah.
All right, Sean. Before you leave, I'll ask you two questions. Right. Sure. First is, where did you hear about our stream? Did you read my comments on Daniel's post or something like that? That's where you got.
So I was watching the debates yesterday, and you guys showed up on my front page on YouTube, and it was a live. So I think lives get priority, so it just showed up there, and I saw there was only a few people there, and I was like, oh, let's see what these guys have to say.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
It was good
serious.
talking to you guys.
It was a really nice conversation, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. It was nice talking to you guys.
Second question: can I, if I may ask you, and you can hold answering this question? Are you from originally? I mean, or probably your roots are subcontinental?
How'd you know?
Ahmed that gives it away. Yeah.
Ahmed gives it away. Yeah. Oh my God! I thought my first name would have kept me, kept me undercover.
You should have used a better name, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually from Canada, but yeah.
All right. So just give you a brief idea. This channel, Mahdin is there, myself, Philo, and then Khayalie. So three of us, and we are our roots are from three different places from the subcontinent. I don't know how much you visit these places, but I'm from India. Mahdin is his ancestry is from Bangladesh, and then Khayalie is from Pakistan, basically.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually going to Pakistan pretty soon. I'm going to be spending 1 month there in my village.
All right. Really nice to have you here, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, nice meeting you guys. It was good. It was good to discuss. I don't get a chance to talk to people about this sort of thing much, so it's good to talk to you guys. You guys are really
All right.
knowledgeable. It's good.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank
It
you.
was very nice to
All
talk to you too. Very nice to talk to
All
you
right.
too.
Peace out. Yeah.
All right. Bye bye.
Peace.
Bye bye. All right. Shall we?